Sparta, and you guys are a 12th grade ancient history class. We're going to watch a really short video at first, and the worksheets that I gave to you in front of you, because you guys are high school seniors, it's just kind of the easy way to take notes. When we talk about Sparta today, we're going to kind of be splitting it up mostly into like the men's role and the women's role. And so we're going to do an activity with that in the end. So if you just want to jot down like important words or dates or ages or whatever on there. So. So that was kind of the overview of what we're going to talk about, kind of the main points of what we're going to do. So we're going to start with kind of a basic overview of Sparta. So geography-wise, this is Sparta. It is a Greek city-state in Greece, obviously. It was roughly from 650 BC to 300 BC. Really rough because it's kind of really debated if that was when it started or not. But the two main things you need to remember from the video and from this lesson is that Sparta really was considered the first democracy, and Spartan soldiers were legendary. Like their strength and honor. Have you guys heard of the movie 300? Something like that. Like they're still talked about today. Like football teams, college teams, like how strong they were. It's legendary. Like people still remember them. Sparta was a city-state located along the river Everus, the main river of Macedonia. It was removed from the rest of the Greek mainland, so it could kind of be unique from other Greek city-states. It had no city walls, and it was actually pretty small. There wasn't that many Spartans, and the society didn't live very long, but it was really unique and important. Childhood in Sparta. Men and women, like I said, we're going to separate it, and they were very different in how they were raised. But when they were babies, they were brought before a council called the Juriosa, which was a council of elders, and they would examine the baby for any physical deformities, like too skinny, too fat, any kind of mental illness like Down syndrome. If they were deemed unworthy, the baby would be thrown, either thrown into the woods to be eaten by wild animals or thrown off a cliff. And the Juriosa had complete control over if the baby lived or died. So from the very beginning, this was a very ruthless society who really only cared about physical strength. So kind of more on focusing on the men. Boys at the age of 7 were sent to the Agog, and the Agog was a government-run training center for Spartan soldiers. There were 3 different stages of training: the Pleiades, the Padioski, and the Hebonites. And that's just divided by ages in the training. The Agog training, they were training to be hoplites, and hoplites is the Spartan word for foot soldier. They didn't really have cavalry or like other types like we do now. They really had one type of soldier, and that was a hoplite. They were under constant authority and supervision. A huge part of Spartan society is that you were always under someone. You always had to listen to someone, and you always had to obey. They endured intense physical training. One of the examples that that was just crazy to me, but they would take 8 or 9-year-old boys and they would stand them up and they would whip them in front of their families, and the families would have to watch on and cheer on the boys to stay standing. And they would whip them so that they would either like fall on their knees or collapse because of the lack of blood. But the last boy standing was considered the strongest. And the family was there to cheer on the boy to stay standing because they wanted him to be the strongest. So that was kind of the society. It's really crazy to think about now in our society, but that's how they treated each other. And that's kind of what happened. It was all about survival, all about being physically fit, mentally fit. Everybody had to do the same thing. They didn't care about being unique. They really didn't care if you wanted to do your own thing. If you were a guy and you were in Sparta, you were a soldier. No question, no option. You could marry at the age of 30, but you had to be a soldier, like active duty, until the age of 60. So this really was their entire life. A big thing that Sparta is known for is their warfare. And a big part of this is the phalanx battle formation. And as you can see by this picture, the formation was basically they would have these round shields and they would overlap the shields when they were in battle. And they would have shields above them, not depicted in this picture, but they have shields above them overlapping so that when they advanced on the enemy, the spears and the arrows would not be able to kill them. And this was something that had never been done before that they actually made up because they were all foot soldiers. So that was something that the Spartans were known for. Kind of moving on to women, it was the only Greek city-state that required an educational program for both boys and girls. The girl educational program was a lot different than the guys, but it was really significant at that time that they even had an educational program for women. The main purpose of the girls' education was to learn how to one day raise a hoplite to become a mother of a hoplite. But they were taught dancing, they were taught languages, they were taught music, they were kind of taught more of the arts that we're taught now. They had more time to devote to academic education. A well-known historian like Hergus believed women should exercise no less than men because healthier women meant healthier future Spartan soldiers. What's really interesting too is from Sparta came the very first woman to ever win an Olympic game in Athens because they were the only people who allowed their women to actually compete in sports / the Olympic Games. So she was the very first one and she came from Sparta. Marriage and family was a huge part of a woman's life, like at that time. They weren't married until the age of 18, which was kind of a big deal because most women at that time got married around 14, 15, got married to a guy probably 35, maybe older. They got married at the age of 18. That was the youngest they could get married, and they got married to a man much closer to their age, so that was a lot more, that was unusual for that time period. They raised the children and tended to the house while the men were away. If you think about it, the men were trained so much for warfare and being soldiers, they were gone constantly to war. Like, part of the reason why Spartan women had such an education is because the men were gone all the time. And so the women had to do everything. They had to raise the kids, they had to raise the household. They were given much more responsibility than other women at the time. So politics and rights. Like I said, you have to put your mind in the sense of this was before Christ. This was a very long time ago. Women didn't really have any rights anywhere else in the world. But because of Sparta, there was no such thing, in the government system, there was no such thing as a queen or princess, but there is a historical character named Borgio who was the daughter of one of the kings of Sparta. And she had really, really great influence, and that's actually a bust of her right there. And she's spoken about very highly in history because she had really great influence. Women were allowed to talk in the political realm. They were allowed to give their opinion, and that was a huge thing back then. They even had a say in these kind of, in the political realm. Another huge thing is women owned about 40% of the land in Sparta at one time. Because the men were constantly gone, they needed to know how to own the land, take care of the land, and they had rights. they were allowed, like, in rare cases, they were allowed to even divorce their husbands, which was unheard of at the time. So they were given a lot of political rights, educational rights, and the fact that they even owned land while their husbands were gone, they had a lot of independence and a lot of power. So if you guys could get into groups of 2 and talk to someone. These are just some questions to get you thinking about stuff. Just kind of like from your sheet and stuff, think about like the men and women and like what made them different, maybe what made them similar, like